Hey there, come here for a sec. Now, I have a confession to make. I can be stubborn. I enjoy recording real tube amps. Now, because of this channel, I've become a lot more open-minded and I have embraced modelers and things like that. But until now, I have never recorded with a pedal amp, much like this orange terrace amp sitting beside me. So I decided to take the challenge, spend some time with this to see if I could create some really good sounding tones with this little guy over here. Now, spoiler alert, I did. I'm going to break down 3 different tones I created and share some tips with you. Why don't you join me? Hey there, I'm Dan, the self-proclaimed Lonely Rocker. Thank you so much for joining me today. So yes, pedal amps have kind of not made their way through here, and I thought it was time. Also, this is the first time I am featuring an orange product here on my channel, but the purpose of this video is I wanted to see if I could use a little pedal amp like this in place of a real tube amp. So I've created 3 distinct tones, really with 3 different signal chains that I want to share with you, and I want to break them down, let you know what I discovered, and share some tips with you so perhaps you can achieve some of those results yourself. Some of them are more practical than others, but I'm going to break the 3 of those down. So why don't we start off? I'm going to play that riff that I teased at the beginning. You'll see and hear the 3 distinct setups, and then I'll break it down on the other side. All right, that sounded really good to my ears. And I have to say off the top here that this little pedal here, the orange terrace amp, is a lot more versatile than I thought it would be. Now, just off the top, to let you know what this is, if you're not familiar, it has been on the market for a little while. It's a 20-watt pedal amp. You have a solid state power section, and you do have a single tube in the preamp section. Now, what that does, you get a little bit of that tube saturation, which is obviously you'll find in a big tube amp. But the fact that it's a solid state power amp, you can play this at any volume. You don't have to worry about a load and things like that. It's all self-contained. So you can record this in any volume. You can play with headphones. It has a lot of versatility, but I'll talk about some of that a little later in the video. But for the first tone, which is that sort of single coil, kind of funky kind of thing, using this Suhr Classic T Deluxe limited edition, of course, with my favorite strings. I've got Stringjoy strings. Have to give those guys a mention. Not sponsored, but love those strings. Anyways, I wanted to start off by doing kind of a typical guitar amp cabinet setup, and that's what I did. There is a speaker output on the terrace amp, and that's running into, I have a cab in the other room. I have an Angle 4x12 double XL that's sort of set up for all my recording. I have 2 microphones on there. I have a Sennheiser E906 and an MD421 compact. Now those are coming back into the room through my preamp here. I've got a Warm Audio WA273 EQ, and then that goes into the DAW. Now I do double track. Everything is double tracked, whether I'm using real amps or I'm using modelers, or in this case using a pedal amp, just to create that big wide kind of sound. You heard that in the track, but why don't I break it down? We'll take a look on the DAW just to see how those different tracks align together and how it all added up to the final tone that we heard in the track. All right, so let's take a look at the setup here in the DAW. Now, the terrace amp is an interesting pedal because there's not a lot to it, actually. There's only, as I mentioned, 2 volumes here, so you can have a rhythm volume and a lead volume. Now we're here in a recording context, so really they do the same thing. So that leaves me with 2 options here. We've got this shape dial here, and this sort of changes the tonal structure where when you turn in one direction, you're sort of boosting the mids and the brightness, and then in the other way, you're scooping the mids. We don't have a traditional like 3-band EQ here, so I found myself fiddling a little bit. It's a different way to approach it. It was really interesting for me. So I'm living around 1 o'clock here for this particular tone, and then the gain is right at noon. Now, something I just want to address really quickly if you're new to the channel or just getting into what I do, there's a bit of a thing about amp reviews and things like that where people just want to hear it in solo. They don't want you to process it. That's a long discussion that I don't want to have in this video. But for my money, guitar tones are meant to sit in a mix. I mean, some of the best tones we've ever heard are recorded tones, right? And those are track, double track, mixed, fit into a mix. And those are our inspiration. So I don't really buy into this whole thing where if you really need to hear, really want to know what an amp does, you want to hear it in solo. I mean, how am I going to present that in solo? That's a whole debate. So for here on this channel, I like to use products and see how they fit. I'm not taking products that sound bad and making magic and have them suddenly sound good, because that's certainly not the case with this one. Starts with some good information, and then I just do what I need to do to make it sound good. So as I explained with this first setup, we're running this into a cabinet. We've got 2 microphones on there, and that has translated into 4 tracks because I double tracked. We've got 2 on the left, 2 on the right. Each of these tracks represents a microphone because of the 2 mics on there. The top one here, the Sennheiser E906, which is closer to the center of the speaker, that's capturing more of the top end information. The 421 Compact is a little further along the cone. That's going to pick up some of the warmer, some more bottom end frequencies. And then what I generally do here is, as I find a nice balance between the two, I start kind of in solo, but a lot of the work that I do is in context because that's how we're ultimately going to hear it. Once I find that nice balance, I sort of repeat those levels for the other side if for any reason I need to make a tweak, but often those tend to mirror each other. That's just how I work, and it seems to work. So what I'm going to do here is I'll step through each individual track. These are the tones that I recorded straight off of the amp into the cab. It does run through a preamp here where I've done some very minor moves, nothing complex, and then I stack them here. So the first 2 are the pair on the left, and the last 2 are the pair on the right, and I'll just build it up so you can hear how they all work together. So speaker choice and microphone placement will change your tone more than anything else. And that is a form of processing. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Anyway, so now that I have these 4 tracks in here, panning them left and right just works to create that sort of that big wide sound that really works great, especially in a rock context. Now I do a little bit of processing, nothing serious. And you'll notice that it doesn't really affect the tones all that much. These are decisions that I tend to make in the mix. When you are getting guitars to sit in a mix, ultimately you want to give them what they need because guitars are big sounding instruments. They can suck up a lot of air in the mix. So I don't make big moves. So this is not like a lot of processing. But what I do have here, I've started off with an opto compressor. This is IK Multimedia's opto compressor. This is a very transparent compressor, and I'm using this in this case because it's not a very distorted guitar. Heavier guitar tones, I almost never will put a compressor on it because they are compressor naturally. So in this case, I've got this package of 4. These are running into a bus, and then I've got this opto compressor. And then the EQ, if you look at what's going on here, it's really not much at all. Cutting off around 90 hertz is typical of guitar. Anything that happens below that is just information that will get in the way of the bass guitar, kick drum, things like that. And honestly, there's not a lot of meaningful information for a guitar down there, so we just cut that off. And really only 2 other moves. Around 2K, give or take, you'll often find some of the more harshest part of the guitar. Sometimes if you want to get that offensive part out, you can just do a little cut there. And then I've got a little boost here at about 2.5K. Just give it a little bit of air that helped it sit in the mix. That cut, by the way, I often like to tuck my top end of my bass up there. It's a nice little trade-off. We'll pull down some guitar and I'll nudge the bass up there. I find that works. I like a really present sounding bass, very mid-rangey, and that little top end information helps just to lift that bass up a little bit. Just a little tip, something that I like to do. Anyways, I'm going to play this now package of 4 tracks. I'm going to turn on the compressor, and then I'm going to turn on the EQ just to show you that in solo, it's not really changing the tone all that much. We're still hearing the Terra Stamp as I recorded it, but that little bit of extra information that I get from the processing is really helping me in a mix contest. So let's take a listen. you can see it's not really changing the tone, and I field questions. I've seen it on other channels where people are like, oh, you're processing the amp. That's not what it sounds like. It's not changing it really all that much, but the big difference is how it sits in the mix, and ultimately that matters when we are producing music. So now that you've seen all of these steps, and by the way, if you want to see me dive any deeper into these concepts, I would love to do that. If enough of you ask, I would consider making full videos on some of these concepts. I love producing guitars and would love to share as much as I know. Anyways, let's take another listen. All of these tracks combined together in the mix. So another way that I generally use tube amps is that I will run them into a load box. That'll give me a line level that I could take from the load box directly into the DAW. Number one, that protects the amplifier since we're not plugged into a speaker, gives us that load that we need. And then, but in terms of recording, it gives me a simple line output that I can plug directly into my audio interface, and then I can play cab IR. So I wanted to explore that. Now, we didn't need a load box because this is a self-contained device, as I mentioned, a solid state power amp, so we don't need to worry about that. But we have the same sort of workflow where we're getting that raw amp tone. Now, there is an effects loop on this pedal, which I'm going to exploit in the third setup, but utilizing the send, that's the equivalent of a line out from the pedal, and that gives us that raw amp tone without any cabinet, and then allows us to apply cab IRs in the mix. Now, the same thing, double tracking comes into play, but this time I'm not worried about a cabinet, microphones, preamps, and all that. Anything that I need to do, I can handle it on the DAW side. So the second riff, that sort of heavier riff, using the humbucker of this Schecter Solo 2 Custom double pass through this, I'm just taking the line out from the pedal, going directly into the DAW, and then I'll show you what I did on the DAW side. All right, so for the second setup, this is a lot simpler. If you're doing this at home, all you need is your little pedal amp. Perhaps you have this one. You take the output from your pedal amp. Now, in this case, I've taken the line out, the send in the loop, effects loop here doubles as a line out. So that gave me that raw amp tone without any cabinet. And then I can add cab IRs here, whatever pedal you're using. The idea here is, in this case, if you're able to take out a tone without the cab sim or anything like that, you can add your cab sims in mix. There's so many available out there. There's free ones, there's paid ones, whatever you've got available. This is a very, very efficient process. It's inexpensive. You just need this into your audio interface. And then in this case, I've ended up with 2 tracks as compared to we had 4 in the last scenario. By the way, the only thing I'm adding other than what you saw in the last setup is I do add a little bit of reverb, and that's it. So in this case, I'm going to show you, in fact, let me turn off the cab IR. So that's what this sounds like without a cabinet. So if you want to know, hey, I want to hear what the amp sounds like without any processing, well, that's what it sounds like. Anyway, so I'm going to turn that back on. And so yeah, so on the first one, why don't I bring these in here? I've got 2 instances of this Miko 2. This is a cab IR plugin that allows you to move around the microphones. You can choose different cabinets and things like that. I'm using their Mega, I believe that's a Mesa cabinet. And all I've done is I've got different mic combinations for the left and right, because it's easy to do in the cab IR world. I don't need to buy all the microphones. So whatever you're using there, don't be afraid to experiment to see what works. Principle is similar to what I did in the physical world by having a microphone in the middle to pick up some top end information and something a little further onto the cone, into the cone there, just to pick up some warm information. I'm using a very similar thing here. Just each side's a little different. Why? Just because it sounded good. So what I'll do, I'll show you track 1 and track 2. That's all we got going on here, and how those 2 build up to the solo tone, and then we'll see how that fits in the mix. Put those 2 together, it sounds huge. Now, I found that this thing can get really angry, and I thought it was cool. A lot of information there. I found I had to sort of maybe tame it a little bit, but that's where pairing the amplifier with the right speaker combination, picking something that maybe tames it a little bit, unless you're going for a really angry tone. The speaker choice is probably the biggest choice you need to make to determine how good that's going to sound, and that is a form of processing, by the way, whether you're doing it in the physical world or you're using a cab IR. So this combination of speakers that I chose here sort of, I think, sort of tame that harshness a little bit, but together makes that sound really, really big. So if you remember in the last setup where I was using a compressor and EQ, I said I often don't use compression if I have sort of heavier tones. Well, I have heavier tones here, and all I'm using on that bus, because I bus these two tracks to their own bus, and then all I have here is this EQ. There's a little cut here at 90. I've got a little lift here. That may have been by accident or just sounded good in the mix. That cut that I usually do around 2K, this is a lot gentler here. This is about 1.5 hertz here. And then at 2.9 hertz, I've got a little bit of a lift here. Again, that's just bringing up a little definition here. Maybe I found it a little bit dark in the mix, so I just wanted to lift it up. So I'll just do a before and after with the EQ, because again, you'll notice in solo, it's not really changing the tone that much. We're still hearing what this thing sounds like. It just benefited the mix overall. So you can see it didn't add a lot when you're just listening to it like this, but that doesn't give us any context. When I was mixing, I needed that little bit, just to peak those guitars up a little bit in the mix, but it's not changing the characteristics of this pedal. So don't let people fool you and say that you shouldn't process your guitars. If you're mixing, you need to process your guitars. Anyways, let's take a quick little listen to hear what those two sound like in the mix. So this last scenario kind of blew my mind a little bit and really highlights the versatility of the Orange Terrastamp. There's just so much on here, and this is a third completely different workflow that you could try with this particular pedal. Now, I utilize this for the guitar solo. Now, I mentioned earlier there's an effects loop here, so I'm going to get to that in a second, but I have integrated a number of pedals in and behind the Terrastamp pedal. Now, on the floor down here, as I have my favorite wah-wah, that's the Joe Bonamassa wah-wah. That's running into this RD Compact Hot Rod, this overdrive preamp pedal, and that's running to the input of the Orange Terrastamp. Then in the effects loop, I've got the IK Multimedia X-Time. This is a digital delay pedal. Now I could have put all of my time-based effects. I could put reverbs and things like that. Just to keep the demonstration simple, I'll utilize reverb in the mix. But in essence, you can put your time-based effects here. That comes after the preamp. That's my favorite way to do it. Keeps them nice and clean and organized. Putting pedals up front to boost the signal going into the amplifier itself. Very reminiscent of what I do on a full-size tube amp. Now, there's a cab sim output, so there's a built-in cab sim on here. I think it's an Orange 4x12. I'll clarify that. But that gives you an output that you can run your headphones out of. So for practicing, you could have all of this set up and you could be practicing in your headphones. But for recording, I can take an output with a cab sim built in, and I can run that directly, again, through an input on my audio interface and right into the DAW. But I'm thinking of things like fly rigs and things like that, especially with the two channels on here. You can have basically a rhythm volume and then a little boost for your solos, whatever pedals you have in front, whatever pedals you want to put through the effects loop. It is really amazingly versatile for a little pedal. So let's break that down on the DAW side. So the last setup was the guitar solo, and really what's notable here is that I used the cab sim out. There's a built-in cab sim output if you just don't have cab IRs available. If you're playing live, you want to keep it simple. It's just, I think it's there for convenience. It's probably my least favorite tone of the three that I created, because I like to have a bit of control. When I'm recording in cab, I have control. When I'm using cab IRs, I have control. So in this case, without resorting to lots of processing, which some of you don't want to see me do or you don't want to hear, I just had to deal with what I had. I think it's okay. It's probably wouldn't have been my choice had I recorded it the other way with the line out, and then I would have applied something a little bit better. So, but I'm going to use it because I want to show you the different facets of this pedal. But in this case, much like the other two tracks, I did use a bit of compression on this one. And if you look at my EQ, again, that roll off at 90, that little cut here, it's actually a little bit higher. For some reason, I have it at about 3.2K. And then there's a little bit of a lift at 4.4. These are small moves. Again, I was listening in context just because I wanted that solo just to lift up in the mix. But I'll just show you to you in solo here. So all of the effects, as you remember, I recorded those. I had the delay connected to this, and then all I'm adding here is the reverb here in the mix. So what I'll do is I'll play it in solo, and then I'll add the compressor, and then I'll add the EQ. So again, you can see in solo, we're not changing the tone of the pedal, but it's what the track needed. The compressor gave that a bit more of a lift. I just needed it to sit up a little bit higher. It's a decision I made during the mix. And again, the EQ was adjusted in context and on solo, but when you listen to it, it's not such a radical change. So don't fear having to process your guitars, especially in a mixed context, because ultimately you have to give the song what it needs and not worry about what the amp sounds like on its own, because anyways, but this did a great job. And like I said, this was probably my least favorite of the three. I love that first tone. The second one, I think, was a much bigger tone than I thought I would achieve from this one. And what I really learned about this third tone was the sort of the flexibility of this pedal, having the effects loop, being able to build up an interesting sound before I got into the DAW, and then with very minimal processing here to get that in the mix. But there's a look at setup number 3. Well, there's a look at 3 different scenarios, ways you can record with a little pedal amp platform like the Orange Terrastamp. And I have to say, I'm quite amazed of what I was able to achieve with such a little pedal. It's amazingly versatile for really what it is, a very compact size, and really having that effects loop is really what adds to the versatility of this pedals. I have some bigger products that I wish had effects loops in them that don't, but in this case, the fact that they were able to utilize the send from that effects loop as sort of a line out without a cab, then another option with a cab that doubles as a headphone output. It's such a versatile little pedal, and it sounds great. I think what it lacks in controls on the pedal itself makes up in versatility, and I think you've got a lot of different options here. Now, if you're looking to start recording and you've got a bug to record analog, I mean, we've got modelers out there. If you just want to plug and play and you don't want to think about it, take the easy route, just plug in a modeler and you're good to go without much thought. But something like this will get your hands on something more analog, obviously a lot more affordable than a full-size tube amp, and dare I say that this is probably a great gateway into the world of full-size tube amps, which of course Orange is famous for. So anyways, I had a blast doing this. I want to send a big thank you to Orange for providing this pedal and for sponsoring this video. If you want any more information about the Orange Terrastamp, I'm going to put links down below. Some of those may be affiliate links if you want to support the channel. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps me make videos like this, and every little bit helps, and I appreciate that. So big thank you to all. If you have any questions, any thoughts at all, that's what the comment section is for. But if you did enjoy this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. And while you're down there, well, there's tons of recording techniques on this channel. I've got one sitting here on the screen if you want to check it out. But remember, you don't need a band to rock and roll. And, you know, Orange is a legendary amp brand. I think I'm going to go browse their website and salivate about something maybe a little bit bigger. We'll see what happens, but perhaps I'll catch you in the next one.